I'm not going to give a long introduction here because I think many of you know our next pair of presenters. It's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Randy Watson, our Kansas Commissioner of Education, the Kansas State Department of Education, and Brad Newswander, the Deputy Commissioner of Education at the Department of Education. Randy and Brad have been leading the department now for a year and a half, 2 years together.
Way too long.
And
Seems like 15.
2 decades now, 2 decades now. And you know, they've really provided us a steady hand and brought incredible vision at a time of real uncertainty in all of our lives. And I think we should all be thankful for the two of them. Please join me in welcoming Randy and Brad for their presentation, Kansas Vision for Education, Going to the Moon.
Thanks, Rick. Brad and I are excited, to be together on stage because we've been missing each other. We haven't had a chance over the last several months to be together much. But last year at this conference is really kind of when we kicked off all the data because we had been on tour together and we were getting ready to plan the reunion tour. And so we shared a lot with you. I just always like to point out, because it seems that this only happens to me. I don't know if it happens to Brad, but I want you to know that if you were to go to a rock concert, by the way, I went and got a bottle of water this morning, and the lady was jamming to Hotel California. I mean, she had a rocking going on. You would pay primo for these seats right here, all right? I'm just saying, those of you in the back, I'm just pointing that out, all right? So,
I thought I was at Coach's clinic.
yeah. So Brad and I are going to share with you kind of where we're headed, and we'll try to field some questions. And so we want to make this as interactive as possible and kind of go forward. I always want to take some time to maybe introduce to you or reinforce to you 10 State Board of Education members, because we find as we go out that many people don't even know who these people are that are educators, much less non-educators, and if they do, they don't know what role they have. So I work for these 10 people. They hired me, and they're awesome, and they are from the most conservative people you would ever want to know to some of the most liberal people, and they have voted 10-0 on where we're headed, all right? Not any doubt about it. And what's unique about these people is that not every state has this. These people have constitutional powers given to them by Article 6 of the Kansas Constitution that give self-executing powers to these 10 people to run the schools of Kansas. So I remember when I took the job
10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah. Feels just feels like that, right? In November of 15, my sister, who lives in Kansas City, who claims to be the most liberal person in Kansas. I'm not sure that's true, but she calls and she says, "Who do you work for?" Well, you know what that was code for. Who do you answer to? Well, this is who I answer to, all right? And they have self-executing powers. Many states do not have a State Board of Education, or if they do, they're a council appointed by their governor. These people operate independently. Now, here's what they don't have constitutional authority to do: put any money into schools. That was left to the legislature. While they advocate and they produce a budget every year to them, I often get emails or people text me and say, "Can you tell the state school board we need more money in Cherryville?" I say, they know that. But they do not we appropriate the money out of the department, but the legislature is given authority to fund schools, and the state board is given authority to oversee schools. So get to know these people. They're wonderful, and they would love your feedback. Here in this area, Carolyn Wims Campbell, who is not running for re-election by her own choosing, so there will be someone new come next November taking her place. But these are really, really awesome people. And we're going to describe to you what they did by taking what Kansans told them and told Brad and I and put this thing together.
And I might add to it, I've been in education long enough that this is the first time those 10 people unanimously said, we're taking the reins back of public education. Because even though they have a constitutional duty to do certain things, other people were doing that for them. And they came together under Randy's leadership and said, you know what, of the things we have constitutional control to do, we're doing it. And we're getting people across the state on board to do it. So they directed Randy and I to go on this tour that Randy's going to visit with you about and said, we're going to make public education what Kansans say they want, not what people in Topeka say they want. So,
Yeah. So, this is important. What Brad says is that we are serious about changing the dialogue. So I think like this. I was with our communications director last night. We're shooting a little video that's going to go out today. And I don't know what the exact conversation, but she looked at me and she said, why are you smiling? You don't trust me yet. When I give you this feedback, you don't trust me yet. And I think in movie themes, okay? And, I'm not a very big thinker. So I think most of life can be described by an Animal House quote, generally, okay? But I'm gonna tell you a different quote. It comes from Moneyball, which I wanted to go see because of the analytics and things. And my wife was like, let's go see that. And I couldn't figure it out until I was Brad Pitt, right? I mean, she didn't. So, but there's a scene in the movie where he's at the table with his daughter. And they've just implemented all these things with the Oakland A's. And his daughter says, Daddy, are you going to get fired? And he goes, well, honey, why would you say that? Well, I read it. Well, where would you read that? On the internet. And he says, don't go to the internet. Don't read those things, right? So you're on the internet today, right? You've Googled already. You've gotten your news for the day. And my guess is if you read anything about state education that you saw online today, it was not a positive experience, all right? But we can take that over. And these people are giving you the authority to do that. But we can, and I think Rick spoke to that earlier. So this is kind of the metaphor for how we're going to go about doing this. Kennedy in the early 60s said, we're going to go to the moon. He was at Rice University. Said, we're going to go to the moon. And for those of you not old enough to remember that, you can Google it and find out our rockets weren't very good about getting into space. Like they did this, crash, fell over. They weren't very good. And the Soviets had already sent up a little satellite called Sputnik. Caused great concern. And Kennedy issues this challenge. And in July of 1969, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And you will remember that if you're old enough, like me, that you were sitting in front, the family, on the one TV that you had, right? Not multiple, with rabbit ears and some snowy black and white thing, watching that happen. And the challenge before us, as we'll lay this out, it isn't whether we're going to get there. It's a challenge that we're willing to accept. We're unwilling to postpone. And it's often hard when we think about the financial situation, but we're unwilling to postpone because things are going to change in the state, and one in which we intend to win. Brad and I are very competitive people. Very competitive. He likes to break every bone in his body. I'm old enough now. Brad, why don't you go do that? But we're going to win this thing. Collectively, we're going to do this together. And we're going to do it because Kansans said this is what we want that we're going to share with you in our education system. So just think of this. For the class of 2016, you remember them? They just went across the stage, right? Shook someone's hand. The job market is over 70% of the jobs they're going to face require something beyond that high school education. That's almost double from a generation ago in Kansas. This is Kansas data. And there's the breakdown.
And the nice thing about that for Kansas, for our kids, just like Smoke, I had one walk across stage this year, and I have one 8th grade promotion. We still do that. But the future's bright for them because we rank 6th nationally in that 71%. So there are good jobs out there, but that high school diploma won't land the job. It's like 8th grade promotion used to be. You celebrate it, but for the vast majority of our kids, they have to do something after high school to get to the middle class.
Yeah.
And that's different.
So Brad and I last year shared this data with you. It was really hot off the press because we had just finished the tour where we asked Kansans, if you were to describe a successful 24-year-old living in our state, what would you say about that person? Excuse me. How would you describe the person? What are the characteristics and the attributes of that person? And this is what they told us.
And it's no surprise that we all need those academic skills. They are there. But the problem is, what we were doing at a state level was not aligned with what Kansans said they want. How did we measure success for over a decade in your school systems or for any one of your students? What was the measure?
State assessment.
State assessment.
Right. Smoke's talking about we have to have breaks because the kids are so stressed out. Well, who stressed them out? It's like the old Pogo cartoon. We met the enemy and he is us. We did, because we were under no child left behind mandate to drive a state assessment school.
And Kansas said being academically prepared is appropriate. It wasn't the test that was the issue. It's what we did with the results of it at a state level. And Kansas said very clearly that even though we need academically prepared kids, the majority of the skills that they need to be successful, you cannot measure with the standardized test. But we allowed that to trump the conversation, and Kansas said at a state level and really even at a national level. But we can't blame national. It's in state statute. Way before, so we kind of did it to ourselves. We allowed the test to trump the conversation, and Kansas said we're out of balance.
Absolutely. So yesterday, I think it was yesterday, sometime this week, I was at Mid-American Nazarene College, and we had 5 business people on stage. We had Cerner, we had Garmin, we had McDonald's, and then there were a small engineering firm and small construction firm had about 50 to 75 employees. And we asked them the question, if you were to talk to the educators, because they're all educators in the room, what skill set would you tell them that you're looking for? And not a one of them talked about that. Not a one of them. Over 20 minutes. They talked about all of these skill sets. They're assuming that they'll come with some set of academic skills. That's an assumption I think they're all making. So Kansas told us this, over 2,000 responses. You know, and you're going to hear the rest of this conference, you already heard from Diane, and you're going to hear from Cindy, and then all the breakout sessions. In order to get to this, we're going to have to change a system. We're going to have to change a system, and you're going to have to be a part of having a voice in that change of the system, because we're not going to get there just teaching to a test that we're going to give on Friday. So this is really important. But as Brad and I went out,
this group here was made up over 800 teachers, school administrators, over 100 parents, over 100 students, over 100 higher ed, post-secondary. This was what they told us. But of this tour, only about 3% of the people that showed up were from business and industry. So we got the bus fueled up. We went back out across the state and met with local chambers of commerce and asked them the same question. What skills, attributes, and abilities, and what do you think they said? Same thing.
Over and over again. And if you think about it, as we think about this change, and again, how, you know, it's always easy to look back, and that's what we're doing, and saying, well, we had some good intentions as we went in this, because we want kids to have more robust reading and math skills. There's no doubt about that. I have to say that because Cindy Couchman would make sure I put that plug in for math right there, right? Hey, by the way, I always digress on this, don't I? Brad, have we used college algebra this morning? Just want to point this out, Cindy. I don't think I've used college algebra this morning, but I'm working on it. Maybe later. All right, I'm going to solve for, I'm trying to find x, and we're going to get that done. Okay, yeah, factor some trinomials. All right, so we're working on that. Business leaders said we've got to have these things, and we're going to have to change systems. And in the old system, when money got tight, what got cut? Art, music, PE, field trips. Those virtual field trips, we used to take some of those even, right? We cut all those so that we could do what? Make sure we had enough tutoring in reading and math to make sure we scored well on the assessment. And Kansans now, whether it's business or whether it's the general population, said, listen, get back in balance. So I always tell people, how many in the room started your teaching career prior to 2000? You have some work to do. You have some work to do, because how many of you started your career after 2000?
You've been brainwashed.
We call them the youngins. We call you guys the youngins. You went through a system that taught you your role was to increase student achievement, and that was your primary role. If you taught before 2000, your role was to help students be successful, of which achievement was part of that, right? All right, those of you who taught before 2000, do you remember when we used to come to you and ask, what do you think about this child? What do you see? Now, if you're in a POC, you got to have data charts, right? You ever been there and you go, well, I don't think that's quite what I see in that first grader. I don't care, right? Because we've tested them like 8 different ways. You're going to have to help the younger people and principals and superintendents who know that system, know that we're going to back this up and say academics are very important if put in context with the other skill sets that kids need.
I had on that tour, the CEO of a pretty large corporation. He was like, son? And I was like, yeah. He said, let me put it this way. Have you ever interviewed someone? I was like, yeah, I interview a lot of people. He goes, how many questions are on that interview? I said, typically around 20. He goes, how many of those questions do you ask them about their academic knowledge? Normally about the first 1 or 2. Tell me about your preparedness to do the job. He said the rest of that interview, we're looking for non-academic skills. And questions like, describe a situation where you struggled through, how did you come about, and it makes sense. So as a state, we have to readjust so you can do what you need in order to teach those non-academic skills.
So I won't mention the company, but it's one of the biggest companies in Kansas. One of the largest companies. And Blake Flanders, who's the CEO of the Board of Regents, and I were summoned to the CEO's office about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And after some, hey, would you like a bottle of water? The next 30 minutes was blistering us by him saying, you are not producing the workforce that I need in this area. And what are you going to do about it? Or do you want me to create my own training? Because whether it's K-12, and we're hiring, fairly quickly out of K-12, or whether it's engineering or professional, we're not seeing people with this skill set that we need. So I think it's refreshing because, we did a nice session at Emporia State just a few weekends ago on a Saturday, and I was with a teacher in a breakout session from Blue Valley. She was an elementary teacher, and she was saying, I've got 25 kids in my classroom, and she was describing, the needs of these kids. And I kind of walked in the middle of it, and she was describing one young person. And she goes, and I can't do all these things when I'm expected, that I've got to produce growth on this assessment that I got to give, and then you guys throw this state assessment at me, and I don't even know what I'm going to do with that. And I just said, okay, tell me about the one person that you're describing. What would you do tomorrow if it was all in your power to help this student be more successful? She goes, I'd get with the counselor because we need a social emotional plan. This kid's dad went to prison this week because he beat his mother almost to death. So I got mom in the hospital, I got dad in jail who's going to be going to prison, and this kid is not ready to learn reading and math. So what would you do? I'd get the counselor, we'd start putting together how we're going to really wrap our arms and our heads around this kid. We're going to try to get some mental health. And here was the response that we're going to give you over and over. Go do it. Go do it. That's what that kid needs today. That's your professional opinion. Go do it. Go help that kid be a little bit more successful tomorrow than they are today. And that's what we're here to talk about. So the state board said, we're going to listen. And here's the vision where we're going. Here's the moonshot. We're going to lead the world. Brad, who are we going to beat with that?
Everybody.
If you want to tweet out, Oklahoma, Missouri, we're not coming after you. We already got you. You're in the rear view mirror. All right? Those are our friends. So we like to taunt them anytime. Talk about trash, And
you know what? We're already so close in the board's outcomes nationally, but the board said, you know what? If we're going to the moon, we're going after Singapore, China. We can do it. And you've heard this before. Will it happen overnight? No. But when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today. So the board planted some trees, and they said, we're going to win the world in this.
In this, the success of each one of the kids. So how many of you personally have more than one child in your family? Has there ever been a conversation over dinner when you look at your spouse and go, how did this one come from us? Right? You ever had that? Brad may have experienced that this morning when his son called and said, can you do something about your daughter? Sibling thing, right? So think about that in a middle school of 600, where every kid is different, where how they come to school and what happened last night is different. Some of them ready to rock and roll, and some of them marginally ready to rock and roll, and some, we're not on the bus to get to the concert. How do we do this? And you do it by inverting this system we call school. That when you look at the needs of every kid, and Diane was talking about that personalization, what does every kid need to be successful? That changes the system. It changes the system. Because I will tell you, by and large, right now, we don't do that. I haven't even shared this publicly, but on a Friday just a few weeks ago, I got a phone call from a mother who said, I just got a call from my school, this was about 9:30 in the morning, telling me that tomorrow afternoon, my kid isn't going to graduate. And my thought was, that can't be. That's less than 24 hours away, right? And you know what that was really about. The invitations are already set, right? Aunt Molly and Uncle Tim are already here. We got the cakes, and you're telling me my kid's not. So I called the school, and the answer was, yes, we messed up counting their credits. Now, could that happen? Sure, right? And so now, so they thought about it. I said, you really want to take this one on? So they did the right thing, I think. The kid went across the stage. Everyone, photo op, there was no diploma, came back the next week, finished the one credit that they had made a mistake that she needed to do, and mom was pretty happy, right? Just a little tweak. Still didn't, right? We still had to have the standard, and we've got all kinds of examples that we get calls on where we question whether this is what we're after or what we're after is uniformity, that everyone has the same rules and regs, right?
It actually is the N of one. And that's hard to think about. But what if that one was your one? And if we want to lead the world in some of these things, would you ever get to 100% of anything? Well, what if we went as a state from 87% graduation rate to 94? You know what? We would lead the nation at 94%. Is that doable? Absolutely. Then what about 95, 96? But we got to start today. We can lead the world in this.
So if nothing else, as we go through and we start to get into the details of this, we want you to know this. The real factor that we want you to leave here is, if you're doing in your school district, in your classroom, what's best for your kid, we're there to support you. Does that make sense? So whatever outcomes we're going to design to try to measure this, and however we're going to go by developing systems to do this, this is what we're after. This is the key. And that's going to be different in every classroom in this state on any given day, right? It just is. It's going to be different.
And when I get the call from the parent, can my high school legally require my daughter to have 40 hours of community service in order to graduate high school? That was the call I got. And when Randy says, we'll support you, what do you think my answer was? Sure, that's a local decision. And you know what I can also say now? In over 2,000 Kansans, including 127 business and industry, said civic engagement and community service is one of the highest skills that we want in a successful young Kansan. So I applaud your district for requiring that of your daughter. She's like, thank you. I just wanted an answer. I was like, yeah.
So what is it that we're after in terms of the skill set when they walk across the stage? State board said they're this. Academic, absolutely. You absolutely have to have some skills. No, you can't be illiterate. You have to have skills. Cognitive, thinking skills, technical, employability, what Brad just talked about, civic engagement. So that's what we're trying to wrap our head around as we get to these things. And many of the soft skills, those employability skills, will fall right in here so that they can be successful in that next step, post-secondary, with a certificate of the workforce without remediation, or they're headed to 4 years of college. Our graduation rate, one of the highest in the country right now. As Brad said, we don't even have to get to 94 because the diploma counts just came out yesterday. Ed Week's diploma counts. We're at 87. The highest in the nation's 91. We're number 2 with students with disabilities. So proud of that in the nation with graduation. And then, if you think about that, we do that in Kansas. Yeah, absolutely. 80 and 90% of our kids go off to college. In fact, we were just listening to James Regier, Whitewater Remington, said, I just surveyed the class of 16. He said, and every single one of them told us they're going to college. He goes, I can tell you, by looking back over the last 10 years, that's a lie. That between the time they tell us and they go across the stage in the next fall, they just don't show up. So we're going from that graduation rate to 80, 90% of kids saying they're going to college to our to 6 years after high school, less than 50% of them have completed any of these things. And that's hard then to get to the middle class. So if you want to know the skill set, that's generally the skill set that we're looking for. And here are the outcomes that we're going to use to measure the vision. But I want to come back before we go into this, because gets us into the meat and potatoes of it. But this is what we're after. Brad said before, when we started out No Child Left Behind, there wasn't anyone that thought we shouldn't raise math and reading achievement, right? And still, I don't think anyone would argue with that. Let's raise math and reading achievement. But did you see what happened over that decade when we said you have to have 100% of the kids proficient on one assessment to measure that reading and math? Did you see the behavior that created? It had unintended consequences. So when we get to these next set of outcomes, we don't know exactly that it's going to lead to this. I'm just going to be honest. It's our best analysis of that we think it will, but if we see that all you are doing are graduating kids without these skills, attributes, then you're gaming the system and not worried about the success of the kid, right? So we're going to talk about these just briefly, but what do you not see there? Is there a test score up there? We're not going to rank order schools by test scores. We're not. We have to do some things on federal accountability, but those are indicators that you all need that data to make some determination of what you're going to do with kids tomorrow to help them. But we think it's kind of like taking a snapshot. So you're going to go play the Masters golf tournament. When is the winner of the Masters determined? After how much golf? All of you are going, I don't know, what he's talking about. It's 4 days. So take a snapshot in the middle of it. And then how often does that predict the winner in any major golf tournament? Rarely. Rarely does someone lead start to finish, right? So when you take a snapshot of someone in any kind of thing and you start making big judgments about schools and teachers and professionals, you're misusing that data. So test scores are important for you to use to help instruct. Kindergarten readiness, we just want to maybe spend a minute on these.
We will be piloting this year with several school districts a new screener. But I want to be clear, it is not an assessment and it's not an entrance. It's to find out what percent or what kids are prepared to be successful, have the skills to be successful at kindergarten, and what do we need to do to help them if they're not. If a student, a child, is age appropriate to be in kindergarten, we want them in kindergarten. But we need to find out what skills they're lacking or they have. And at the same time, one of our largest gaps in this state and in most states is kindergarten readiness. And we spend the next 12 to 13 years trying to remediate kids, and we can't even tell you what percent of our kids are not prepared coming. So we're going to design it, pilot, roll it out 17, 18, so when we find communities that have gaps, we can get them the resources. But we've got to start on the right track with kids.
And that's all we're going to try to do is divert resources where we need to have them and try to get more resources to go there. Individual plans of study, real key here is the second part, focused on career interest, or I like to say someone's passion. Trying to find out, why would you get up in the morning and do something for the rest of your life, whatever that is. And I tell the story, but it's applicable. My wife and I, our entire adult life, have been in education. She's an elementary principal. She's been an elementary teacher, and I was a teacher and a principal. And our son who's on the autism spectrum, comes to us in high school and declares that he's going to study animation at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And that is not in Kansas. And this is a kid that does not leave his room, did not go to prom. Socially, he's content just to come home from school and go to his room. And he tells us he's going to go from McPherson, Kansas, 21 hours away to school. And we looked at each other and said, there's no way this has no chance of success.
I'm not married to him, by the way. He met his wife.
There's no chance of success because change for him was extremely difficult, right? And this is like huge change. I remember when we changed homes, right? One time and it was a major meltdown. 4 years later, last year, in June of 2015, he graduated with honors, animation. What's really cool is that today he is the lead animator for a TV series that I strongly suggest you don't watch on FX because it's horrible. I said, who would watch this stuff? But it will air this fall. He's working on several series of that. And I don't know, he gets paid. Someone must watch this stuff on FX. I don't watch it, but it's an animated series. Why did all that happen, though? His interest and passion, he works all night on this stuff. He just loves it. Trumped his disability, and his own parents couldn't see it, right? If you find the passion of what a kid wants to do, and you become an adult, then that's what we want. High school grad and post-secondary, you want to talk a little bit about that, Brad?
Yeah, we visited just a little bit about this, but again, we have got to start treating high school graduation like we do 8th grade promotion. You celebrate, because back 80 years ago, 8th grade was the end of it for most people. We still celebrate it. I don't know why. I used to always take, when I was a principal and superintendent, I'd take a picture of them, how nice they dressed at 8th grade, and then I'd show it to them again their senior year and say, just please one more time dress like that. And they don't. But high school graduation should be celebrated, but it does not open the doors that it used to, even 20 years ago. Celebrate it, but we've got to do a better job of bridging that gap between high school and post-secondary or directly into a high-skilled workforce. Because we have too many kids, if they don't graduate, there's about an 8% likelihood they will ever enter the middle class. It's not impossible, it's just very improbable. So we've got to really focus on that.
And finally, social emotional growth. And we're standing here at KU, and I will tell you in our state, no better leaders than KU in this area. We're using several of their people and helping us formulate that. Really, KU does some outstanding work here. And you know that that's going to be the major challenge because mental health concerns are the fastest growing problem in most of our schools. And we don't want to see the data. It's your data. You'll need to survey kids and parents, and you'll need to ask them. We don't want that. You go work on it. You tell us how you're doing with it. Because in order to get to those 70% of skills or 80% of skills, this is going to be really important. Now, as we said, this work can start today and needs to start today, but we're in the early stages. Right? What are we trying to do, Brad? The early stages, what are we trying to get done?
We're planting trees. Let's see if we can get something in orbit. We can change culture immediate to where if half the jobs out there in Kansas right now only require an associate's or a certification, then we need to treat those kids and honor and celebrate them as much as we do the kid going into pre-pharmacy. And we can do that today. So we are in this early stage of this, but there's things despite all the white noise out there, There's things that we can do today and start.
And again, because I'm an old guy, the heroes of that space era, for one of the first astronaut we sent up, Alan Shepard, doesn't even go into full orbit. So don't be afraid that we've got to have these discussions. Brad and I like to say, if you leave this conference with a little bit of a headache, that's a good thing, because you're deeply analyzing this thing we call school. Some school districts will be ready to start walking in space, right? We got some new things. We're going to try this thing out as a system. We're in Gemini. We're in that early phase, where we can actually start to space explore. Because if you remember we didn't know if a person could sustain living in space long enough to get to the moon. So as we think about moving more toward maybe project-based or flipping classrooms or individualizing in some way, and we're maybe get away from seat time, or maybe we're going to say, how do we work with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts on these skill sets we call Eagle Scouts, and merge those with schools? As you start to get into orbit, maybe that's the walking in space moment for us. And then soon, we'll be viewing the moon. It'll start to come in more and more of a clear focus for us over that time. And it will be different in every school, and different in every school district, and different in every classroom. And then, Brad, there'll be a time.
I love this one. Eventually, we're going to lead the world, and we'll be at the moon looking back at where we used to be. And if those 10 board members, Randy, and I know every one of you in here, we will never get to the moon and look back at where we were if we at a state level do not change from our level. If we go back to holding you accountable to one thing, whether it's a standardized test or anything else, we'll never get to the moon. We will never lead the world if we don't focus on each individual kid. And we've got to change our behavior to allow you, and you're already doing it. The problem is we've been in your way. And Kansans told us at a state level we have to change all of this. None of this was Randy or I's idea. This was 100% what Kansans said we need to do. And I'm glad Randy came on board and agreed, and our state board members. We may not all agree on how we're going to get there, but all 10 of them unanimously said that's where we want to go, because that's where Kansans said.
It won't be a linear journey. If you again remember, space program, there were setbacks. Probably the biggest one was Apollo 1. Never got off the space pad, it burned. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, John Glenn, Alan Shepard. True. We still talk about those people with great admiration of what they did in that context of where we were going. And you know who the new heroes are? All you have to do is look at the person next to you. Those are our new heroes on this journey. They're the teachers and the people working in the field every day to make this happen. So, Rick, thank you for your leadership and KU's leadership, not only in bringing this conference together, but really spurring us to think differently and aspire to bigger heights. And thank all of you for the opportunity. As Brad said, we're here to serve. And we welcome your texts and your emails and your phone calls on how we can do it better. We have had over the last, I think this week alone, Brad, during some meetings, 2 different ones, Brad looked at me and said, this is cool. And I was having a conversation with the superintendent, that's been around a long time, about every single kid in his school system and how they were looking at that and how to help every kid. So thank you. Enjoy your summer, all right? Take a little time, rejuvenate the batteries. enjoy this conference. And again, if we can do anything to assist you, let us know. Thanks.
Thanks.